Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Paris Talks Marketing. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with Barry Mainz, who is the CEO of ForeScout. Barry has over 3 decades of leadership experience in cybersecurity operations. He is an operating partner at Crosspoint Capital Partners and former COO of Malwarebytes, where he shaped the go-to-market strategy. Previously, he was CEO of Mobile Iron, president of Wind River Systems, an Intel subsidiary, and held roles at Mercury Interactive, Makara, which was acquired by Red Hat, and Sun Microsystems. He also serves on boards of private and public companies and holds a BA in communications from San Francisco State University. So, Barry, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paris. Thanks for having me.
So, I understand that you are hot off of a successful trip to the RSA conference. And you did say that at RSA, everyone kind of looks the same if you squint. So coming off of that showroom floor, what actually separates a platform that survives from one that blends into the buzz at RSA?
Well, that's a good question. So, yeah, it was pretty chaotic this year. I think they had the most attendees that they've ever had. So it was very, very crowded. And that's a good thing. I think people really care about cybersecurity. That's what the RSA conference is about. So there's a lot of attendees. It is very hard to separate yourself. People are using the same words. They use the same AI. They use the same buzzwords about a platform. So I think it has to do with your messaging and what you're talking about. We focused a lot more on OT or operational technology, IoT, and unmanaged devices, and a lot of the issues surrounding that moving forward. We had a lot of buzz at our booth, way more than we did the previous year, but it's hard. And I think the other trick is you have to have a meeting room or meeting rooms off site so you can actually have meetings. And so we did that, which made it a little bit easier than trying to meet in and around the booth where it's pretty loud and crazy. There was also interesting enough, there was animals there. People could pet like little sheep and puppies. I think that was an attempt to, attract people. I'm not sure that attracted the right people because most of the students that were going around spent a lot of time with these sheep and puppies. But nonetheless, I'm not sure I'd use that as a trick to attract people. But, we're trying everything.
So did you say sheep as well? As I can
Sheep,
understand puppies, but sheep, real sheep?
sheep. Yep.
Huh.
It has to do with the laws in San Francisco, which animals you can have. Apparently, you can have kittens, puppies, and sheep. Don't ask me why sheep versus a goat versus, anything else. But there were little sheep there.
That's interesting. Well, I'm going to pivot to something that you said in our first meeting about really out of the box ways to try to get the attention of CISOs. One of the hardest roles to get their attention. These people are bombarded daily with emails and requests by vendors, everybody trying to get their foot in the door. You told me about an example where you received a FedEx package and that cut through the noise of 160 daily sales emails approximately that you get on a day-to-day basis. So I want to hear more about that. And also in this year, 2025, everyone is really going after this personalization at scale with their outbound marketing and outbound sales efforts. But what old school or in-person touches do you think can still move the needle with CISOs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Paris. A couple comments. One, yes, I did get a FedEx package, and I like getting FedExes. You don't get them very much, and somebody sent me a package, so it was effective. I read it, was very clean, and it was basically an offer about, hey, listen to a 20-minute meeting. It seems you might have these problems. Here are some of the customers that, like you, that use our technology. So that was very effective. I think the other thing that's super effective is birds of a feather type meetings. So we will have a combination of customers and prospects in a small venue, small meeting. And the CISOs like that a lot because then they can go and say, hey, ask other people who aren't our customers and say, hey, what else are you using? And then the ones that aren't our customers can ask customers, hey, so what do you really think? Is this technology successful? How did you use it? How is the company? That's been really effective. And you can do those, usually within an hour, hour and a half, pretty quick meeting. sometimes 2 hours if it includes some sort of a meal. Incredibly effective. So that's been very good this year. I probably shouldn't have said it. So I'm not going to have my competition taking advantage of those.
Yeah, sometimes you need to keep those tactics close to the vest.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, but I love that FedEx package. There's some pleasure in really tearing that ribbon open and seeing what's inside. And it feels kind of special being a FedEx package as opposed to just a letter or something.
That's right. Or an email, which
Of
to your
course,
point,
yeah.
almost a couple hundred a day I'm getting just inquiries. And I counted, I was just looking over them yesterday before our call. I would say that at least 15-20% spell my name wrong.
Mhm.
So, which is even worse, right? So they're not that personalized, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So moving along, there was something you mentioned when we spoke prior about your phrase about catching lightning in a bottle just as OT risk exploded. I want to unpack that. What strategic bet paid off when it came to the OT risk exploding? How did you keep that momentum?
Yeah, so most companies catch lightning in a bottle once, and it's hard for them to kind of find that again, like the next big thing. And I'll look at two items. One, we purchased a company called Security Matters back in 2019, and it was a bet that unmanaged devices, so operational technology type of devices, PLCs, et cetera, or IoT devices or medical devices, we could take a look at them, discover them, understand what they are on the network, and then provide some level of security. The sort of big secular trend that helped grow that as the next big growth for us is the fact that the bad actors are going after critical infrastructure, things like planes, trains, automobiles, airports, power grids, and that's where OT and IoT sits. And so we have a great solution and it aligns up with people trying to protect those outdated systems. So that's been really good for us. And we made a bet as we started to see more and more in our research lab, which is in Eindhoven as well, that typically it was more at the beginning, we'd see more operating systems that would tend to be on PC type devices, laptops, phones, servers, maybe some routers. We started seeing that transitioning a couple years back to IoT devices and embedded operating systems that were being breached. So it gave us a pretty good sense that that's, kind of when the bad actors, sneeze, typically people or business or secular trends, catch a cold about a year and a half later. And we happen to be right on that. And so that's really been a big part of our growth in our business. And we're feeling a lot of the sort of tailwind from that.
Hmm. Great. One of the challenges in marketing cybersecurity and also explaining it to people that can unlock budgets that can enable growth is the challenge, as you said, to explain it to your grandma. So, how do you translate the OT, IT, and IoT complexity into grandma friendly or boardroom friendly language that can unlock deeper understanding and unlock budgets that can help you all grow faster?
We try and keep our, to your point, message and messaging simple and talk about business outcomes versus very detailed technical, rants, I like to call them, where, maybe, people that are in your exact industry or at your company understand, but it's hard to kind of either make a distinction between you or a competitor. So I like to really talk about business outcomes. Like to talk about risk, like what happens if you don't, because I think people can easily, if you're in a board, understand risk. Many of the board members are there to prevent risk, so they can,
Mhm.
see it from a risk perspective. And then we like to provide our prospects, partners, and customers with some detailed reports that are cran simple that people can look at, that they could go show their boss or a board. And that usually is a really good way of them being able to talk about internally selling your product, like saying, hey, I got to go get budget. You got a really nice, easy way to show some value that you could potentially show someone that had access to dollars and resources. So those two areas there, I think, become really effective for us. I can't say we're perfect. I think it's a transition. I think you have to be ambidextrous because there is an opportunity when there's technical people in the room to talk very technically. But for the most part, I think you have to be able to do both. Super technical, but also grand, simple, and business outcome.
Hmm. Excellent. All right. Let's transition over into AI. And I've got to bring that up. I think this is a topic that's the elephant in the room in many conversations. And particularly in your case, AI with guardrails. You said that ForeScout won't let AI trigger autonomous controls yet. What risk thresholds keep the block this network actions off limits, such as regulation, liability, or trust?
Are you asking why we don't provide the capability for those autonomous decision making?
Yeah, right now, what is that risk threshold like? So you have AI that can do a lot of the work now in detecting threats and vulnerabilities, but you don't give it full autonomous control yet to trigger different actions. So how do you think about that? What level or degree of autonomy do you give to AI and where do you draw the line?
Well, I think there's a few things like there are certain routines that are off limits. So, for example, shutting down a set of processes. So, if you have, for example, some sort of a operational technology, make it simple, say it's a escalator in a airport, you could shut that escalator off. We probably don't do that. We will alert, hey, maybe there's something going on here, right to the individual that could make the choice to you turn that off, or you turn your industrial robot off, or do you leave it on? Because most times it's not a situation that's going to be bad in terms of maybe it's just an anomalistic behavior on the device. So we let for those kinds of actions, let the user make the decision whether or not they do take some sort of drastic action. We also provide a level of upfront to our customers, the types of things that we do not provide vis-a-vis AI. And at some point, we'll probably let them override that and let them use AI to do more and more as we learn. And we make sure use AI to do more and more as we learn in way we're doing it.
Yeah. So AI is embedded in a lot of ways, I think, into the company. There's embedding into the products to make the products better. There's also AI as an assistant to the people. And on that side of things, from what I understand, there are still thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of security roles that are still open now. Where do you see AI augmenting the human professionals in cybersecurity today? And where is the human judgment still irreplaceable?
Well, there's a lot of mundane tasks out there. And right now, you hit the nail on the head. There are lots and lots there's thousands of open IT jobs. So AI is not going to take jobs away. It's going to make the people that have those jobs life easier. So that's the first step. Second step
Mhm.
is there's a lot of things that just, looking through log files. Hey, show me the things I need to look at and take action. And when you're talking about tens of thousands of log files, it can be difficult. You're searching, you're looking. So it can go and,
Mhm.
expedite some of the manual functions. Create reports. You got to send daily reports out. It can create reports on the fly. You can tell it how to change up the report, especially if there's a complicated data set. So I think there's a lot of, at least as we're moving in, some just things to simplify the cybersecurity professionals. And I think that that's going to more of a gratification. I think there are some apps that tend to have a lot more exhaust coming out of them. And as a result, makes it more complicated for users to use and be efficient. And in those situations, AI can help. Like, for example,
Mhm.
some of the SIM applications, right? There's just a lot of stuff to take a look at.
Yeah. Do you all have any AI usage policies or AI training for everyone at the company?
Oh, we do. Yeah.
Okay.
Training, we've come out. That's a really good question because there are some things that we need to make sure people understand that it could be a little dangerous. I think as we even look forward and you've got, quantum computing and, sort of agentic AI, or we talked a little bit more about, the autonomous actions. I think we have to be
Mhm.
more and more careful because could take some control, take some action that could lead to harm or injury. So I do feel
Mhm.
like we have been doing training. I think that will continue. I also think it'll become a standard. Like in California, you have certain types of trainings that are required just by the state that all companies have to go do. I think that one will come up because of
Mhm.
the liability issue in and around what AI could conceivably do in the future and now.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to talk about your work with the US government and Department of Defense. According to the stats I have, about 40% of ForeScout's revenue comes from the US DoD and other civilian agencies. So how does operating in this so-called these bomb-tested environments shape the roadmap for commercial buyers?
Well, a couple things. One, scale. These are the
Mhm,
largest entities in the world, many of them. You don't see companies in many cases as large in terms of the number of endpoints, number of users, et cetera. So you learn a thing or two when you're in these really difficult environments, large, complex, all around the world, right? Geographical dispersion. And so when we go to a bank, we go to a hospital, we go to a energy company, we've had a lot of experience and we're working in very, very mission critical environments, even close to where the war fighters are. So, mistakes are a problem. And so,
mhm,
taking that sense of urgency, it's also how we run the company too. I think the level of moving from insight to execution when customers have an issue, we've basically perfected that and had a lot of experience. So we could take that, how we work with in the Department of Defense, and take that same kind of model on how we work with large companies, doing it in a expeditious way. How do we handle what technical people we put on? How fast can we short to ground some of the issues? So I think it's helped us be a better company. Working in some of the federal agencies, they're tough to work with, right? There's
mhm.
a lot at risk on their end. So it's a direct, no BS type environment. And we've been able to go and apply some of the learnings, as I said before, to what we do with the other outside of the government. So it's great. I really think
Mhm.
it's made us a better company.
Yeah. One of the things that you posted on LinkedIn, I think, has a connection with your government work. There was a post about the Netflix series Zero Day, and it did pretty well. I think it was fairly viral. I don't know the exact stats, but you seem to be doing great on LinkedIn. And I think one of the things we tell a lot of our cybersecurity clients is that the leadership teams, starting with the CEO, they really have to be active. And I think that builds a lot of trust. The getting to know your personal brand will help people to build trust with the company brand. And
Hmm.
I'd like to know, could you walk us through your content process from ideation to data sourcing and other metrics that you watch for social media?
Yeah, I won't give all my secrets away, but I'll tell you the ones that I think are effective. First of all, we have a team we game board on what types of narratives we want, right? Some are obvious. Hey, you go to RSA, you have a narrative after. That's an easy one. But,
Mhm,
I do feel like sometimes blending what is out there in our daily life, like a Netflix special, with cybersecurity, and that happened to be one aimed at a cybersecurity set of issues, and kind of
mhm,
tying that back to ForeScout, I think that kind of connects with people because they're seeing what happens. And there is a sense of hyperbole in that show, but let's say things could happen where they can connect, wow, that's reality. Hey, if you don't have the right cybersecurity strategy, a train can crash into a car. Hey, you could have, you know, all the stoplights go out and chaos could ensue in a particular city. So I do feel like just game boarding, making sure you can connect the reality and what would be in a daily personal life. I think they need to be creative. I mean, there's so much stuff on any social media platform, say LinkedIn is one of them, that people just don't look at it. I can tell you ones with videos or pictures or awards or accomplishments people tend to look at. And I think if you nail it right, where you're kind of combining their daily life with some tech and things like we did with the 0 day post, they do way better than, some of the others. Just a thought. I think I'm not a huge fan of some of the thought leadership where someone's just pontificating, but you have to do some of that, right, to have your own voice. So we'll talk
mhm,
about topics and have a good conversation. And I travel a lot, so I'll send some bullets. Hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I heard. What do you think? So we do some ideation that way and kind of keep it sort of fresh and clean.
mhm. Do you see any direct correlation between your LinkedIn activity and the lead generation coming in?
That's a good question. I think I've had plenty of CISOs I hadn't met yet. And one of them, I was at RSA and she said, hey, I saw your Netflix post. That was pretty cool. Some of that stuff is so boring to read, right? So,
Mm,
I think it makes a connection. And anytime you can make a connection at any level that is, unique, it helps with demand gen. People probably think, hey, to your point you mentioned earlier, I do represent what I do say, what we do say as a company. represents and affects our brand. So I think having a good experience, someone gets to see it, and someone commenting about the Netflix post, I think was very, very useful. Also, I think people getting to see numbers, posting, hey, here's what our year looked like, and a momentum post about the numbers.
Yeah.
Very people look at it and say, wow, we're not publicly traded, so they don't get to see that. They can't read a 10Q or 10K and see how well you're doing financially or a press release. But posting those momentum releases, people really look at and they say, wow, because people want to know, hey, are you a viable company? I would say one thing that I get asked more than I used to is just about financial viability. So posting those helps because I think it's definitely the days are gone when you could spend money like a drunken sailor, not make any money and grow like crazy. I don't think that that's a very interesting way for most companies to appreciate you. They
Mhm.
like you to make money, be profitable, be a good company. They don't want you going out of business, especially if they're using you for something mission critical. So going back to your
Yeah.
question, people like those momentum releases about, hey, you're doing well. Awesome. Right. I'm with a winner. I'm with a good company.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some CEOs of private companies be a lot more transparent now with their numbers. One example that comes to mind is Adam Robinson, who was on this podcast about a year ago, and he is radically transparent with not only their successful growth numbers but also failures. And I think also that humility, in a sense of admitting to some mistakes as well, to try to warn people, hey, don't make the same mistake that I did. Watch out for this. I think people appreciate that. It really humanizes the leader, and that extends also to the brand. But it's particularly in the cybersecurity industry, people want to partner with a winner, and they want to make sure the expression "no one's ever gotten fired for hiring IBM." This, I think, is a little bit true here. Is if I need to really, really trust my cybersecurity company, just because if they're teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, I mean, if they go under, and who knows if this technology will support me in the future. So I need real reliability. I need to have a gold star partner in this area. So I
Yeah.
think that also it makes it important for you to really tout the company's growth and financial achievements and stability.
Yeah. And, and going back to your analogy about no one gets fired for, purchasing IBM or partnering with IBM, there's a saying that says nobody gets fired in cybersecurity for listening to Gartner or Forrester or some of the analysts. So you have
Mhm,
to do well vis-a-vis a financial profile, but the analysts matter too, because people are wanting to
mhm,
be able to go and say, even if, let's say, a breach happened, they can say, hey, I went to Gartner. Look, this is what they said. I was partnering with the top, right? And it's not a if, it's a when in cybersecurity. And for cybersecurity professionals, it's limiting the blast radius. It's, hey, can you be resilient? Hey, how do we plan for issues? How fast can we come back up if we had a problem? All of these things they plan for. So I think it's really a matter of, hey, how do I have the best team on the field, if you will? That's your employees and certainly your software partners or technology partners. And doing
mhm.
both of those, matter. So analysts matter, they do, and I think financial profile matters as well. Hey, is the company doing well? Because you don't want that company, especially if you have invested a lot of money and that company is not solvent enough to invest in R&D to build better products, and you're caught with some sort of a breach because they couldn't invest and build the right feature functionality. That's a problem. So I
Mhm.
agree with your point of view. And like I said, people do ask me about, hey, are you successful financially? What does Gartner say about you? These kinds of things. So we try and stay on top of that.
Yeah. I imagine that the PR team really should spend a lot of time knowing these analysts, the Gartner and the Forrester analysts, and there's probably a subset of PR, which is the AR, the analysts' relations,
Yeah,
particularly within those big companies. They are so influential.
correct.
Barry, I want to ask you about the way in which you keep up with the high volume of new threats that emerge every day. I was looking into this recently. There's different sites that give you a feed of new CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures.
Mhm.
And I think it was, if I still have it up here, yesterday on this site called cvefeed.io, there were 313 new CVEs published in one day. So that's enormous. And maybe that's an exceptional day. How do you parse through all that noise? And are you able to, what we see in our search data is that usually there are these 48 to 72 hour spikes with a specific CVE number and then it drops off. But are you able to sift through this mountain of new CVE threat data that comes in, and are you able to translate any of that into kind of real-time marketing?
So first, that's a very viable question. And this is why you see most successful cybersecurity companies having a research lab. And we have a research lab we call Videri Labs. It's in Eindhoven. And they're responsible for not only taking the published CVEs, but also ones that are not published, and making sure that we have a process to test those against our software to make sure that, we're okay. Because some of those
Mhm,
don't have to do with anything on our software and some do, right? Hey, what can we do make our software better? We work with the ecosystem. So all of the Palo Alto networks, the Cisco's, the CrowdStrikes of the world, we share data. We also share data with DISA and CISA, which is the agencies within the federal government, also NATO and federal governments around the world. So we reach out if we see something. And, I don't know if you know that there are hotlines and people built for researchers like who might find CVEs. And most of these companies have a sort of a quick path to the governments and quick path
mhm,
to companies. So most companies will also have a CISO. So you reach out to him or her, say, hey, here's a device that's vulnerable. Just to let you know, you have a lot of these devices that you purchased. You should upgrade these. And we talk to
mhm,
that with our customers and even prospects. So the
mhm,
community is actually pretty communicative with one another and federal governments and large companies. So we
mhm,
stay on top of it. And if you're going to be a successful cybersecurity company, you have to have a research lab and an effective one. And fortunately, we do. We focus primarily, and what we give back to the community is around IoT, OT, and medical device, or IoMT devices. So we provide the data back to the community about CVEs we find, this kind of thing. And then we take the data in and prosecute that data against our software, as I said before, to make sure that we're still protecting with the latest and greatest.
mhm. Yeah, it seems like there's just really this constant barrage of new threats coming in and having to find the ones that really matter and then inform the people that need to know. I imagine that could be never ending every day.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting too. I think you have to have the right researcher DNA too. Our research lab comes from academia. I think we
mhm,
have an average of 1.4 PhDs per person. It's
mhm,
located in a very close to a college, university there. And I was visiting them. The other thing is they like helping people. They say, hey, we are preventing the bad actors from having an entree into what we do every day and day out. And
mhm.
so I think it also has to do with them feeling good about their jobs. I really do. I mean, I've talked to other CEOs, and if you have a set of researchers that don't really have that mindset, it's tough, right? Because, you're
Mhm.
looking through a lot of data, you're looking through a lot of things. And, unfortunately, if you don't kind of have a sense of the bigger picture, it can be monotonous. And
Yeah.
so I think they did a really nice job of putting together a killer team.
Yeah, yeah, and those people especially need to be mission driven and really see the purpose, the bigger purpose in their work. Otherwise, I can imagine it could be a grind day to day, just dealing with that fire hose coming in every day.
Correct.
And on that topic, I want to pivot over and wrap up with leadership and culture at ForeScout. And we know that there's practically a knife fight for talent in this industry. So, what are
Mm.
the rituals and what sort of transparency or incentives do you have that can keep the engineers and overall all the people on the team engaged, especially as these release cycles are accelerating and this fire hose, possibly gets even stronger of new threats coming in? How do you build that resilient culture on the team?
Yeah, I think first, just making sure people understand our mission and making sure that, we are very clear about why we exist, and we're here to protect and keep, critical infrastructure and the services and our daily life that we enjoy safe and secure. And we have a set of tools, software tools that customers use to do this, and making sure people understand that, here are our goals, here's our mission, our goals, but here's some successes, because people like success. Spend a lot of time communicating. So I travel a lot to the other offices and talk about, what's working, what's not, and what our successes are, because I think it's important to get feedback. I also feel like gearing the company around where the money changes hands. I think oftentimes, and I think technologists are guilty of this, they try and be the smartest person in the room versus the best learners. And that does not work when you don't spend time to learn. And so we have some routines and processes that we bring customers in or prospects into our decision-making process and understand where we're doing well and where we're not. So we spend a lot of time on that and bake that in. I mean, we have engineers talking to customers on code developing new things versus
Mhm.
creating something, not talking to customers, rolling it out, and then taking feedback. So there's just some ways that we're doing things that I think a lot of the engineers feel like they're more accomplished because they get to see people using the technology. I mean, you'd be amazed, Paris, when I've talked to other engineering teams and you've spoken in certain kind of called trade shows or events, and engineers never talk to a customer ever. I find that crazy. It's like you're building
Mhm.
something for people, yet you don't even know who you're building it for, and you've never talked to them. It's crazy. So again, money where the money changes hands. And I think the other piece is just, I think you have to have the mindset. You're either getting better or getting worse. There's no staying the same. It's okay to change. That's good.
Yeah.
And you don't get in trouble for, maybe things that happened in the past. I mean, you're going to sit in an environment where as you talk, things are moving so quickly, you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. Just don't do it again, and
Yeah.
charge ahead with some better learning.
Yeah, I totally agree. We even encourage people to take calculated smart risks in order to learn something new. And if there is a mistake, learn from it. Don't make the same mistake twice, of course. But
Hmm.
the learning benefits that come from that usually far exceed the cost of that mistake.
Yeah,
And
I think that the other one thing I'd add here, Paris, which is interesting. I think there's also a mindset shift, like thinking about the outcome. And I give a simple analogy: you don't go to Home Depot to buy a shovel. You go to Home Depot because you got to dig a hole. And
Mhm.
that's a different mindset for how people need to be thinking about the value and how we describe the value and why people use it. I mean, you're going to design a shovel depending upon the kind of hole you have to go dig. And, if it's a little tiny hole, you have a little shovel, right? Do you have a bigger hole? So you go think about that. And so I do feel like just gearing people around that mindset, because it's too easy to just focus on, oh, I'm buying a shovel versus no, 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 no. You're digging a hole. That's just a tool you're using. So thinking of that big picture and the end result. And we do that for our marketing. We do that, think a lot about that for how we communicate to employees internally and think about the value and what the end point is.
Mhm. Excellent. That's a great analogy. Barry, this has been great. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you, or is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
I often get asked, hey, why do you like being CEO? Or why do you like working at ForeScout? And that some of those go hand in hand. And I think I like that question because I can honestly say that I feel what we do protects, our quality of life. And we're in hospitals, making sure that patients aren't affected by power outages or aren't affected by breaches, aren't affected by that kind of bad actor activity. We protect banks, insurance companies. We protect airports. We're protecting our life. And I feel we're making an
Mhm.
impact. And, that makes me feel when I get up and think about, hey, what can we do next to Forescout? Not just about me. And it makes us feel good. And I like it.
Mhm. That's great. Well, thank you for spending the time with me today, Barry. We learned a whole lot. Good luck to you with ForeScout. It's everything is really moving fast, and they're lucky to have you as their leader.
Thanks, Paris. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
All right. Thanks.